So I was giving birth to my third child, and we head to the hospital in the middle of the night, and we get there. It's like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'm on the birthing table, contracting like 3 minutes apart, and we have a 7.4 earthquake. And it was one of the one of the times in my life when I thought I was going to die, because many times we're close, we're almost in a car accident, and we're thinking, oh my gosh, this is it, or we're on an airplane, or something like that happens. So here is this big earthquake hits. We lose all the power in the hospital. Everything is levitating up and down on all those little metal trays that they typically have in the hospital. And my husband and the nurses, everybody was leaning over me, holding me down on the birthing table, because I would literally have flown off the table because it shook that much. And there were windows from floor to ceiling, and all the windows were just shaking. And this hospital was built on rollers. So this is in California. And for anybody that has been to Disneyland, they know that Disneyland is in Anaheim. And this was in the eastern part of Anaheim, so it was bordering to the desert. And this earthquake was centered in the desert, which is why a lot of people aren't aware of this earthquake, because it didn't have a lot of damage, luckily. So all the windows are rattling, and the whole hospital is rolling back and forth. And I'm thinking, this is it. The ceiling tiles are going to cave in. We're just going to be buried in rubble. This is it. Well, the earthquake stopped, and we were still there. And we could hear the generators kick in, and we had the light of maybe like a night light in this birthing unit. And my labor actually stopped at that point. So if you're in the jungle running from the tiger, your labor is going to stop until you get yourself to safety, and then you're going to give birth. So my labor actually stopped. And about half an hour later, it picked back up, and I gave birth to my daughter. And then we had a 7.2 earthquake following that. So I gave birth, we had another earthquake, and then I finally get to hold the baby. And so they give me the baby, and I'm in excruciating pain. So I'm just leaning backwards and yelling to my husband, take the baby, because I was in so much pain. And so that was the first time I hemorrhaged. So they're massaging my whole abdomen, and this mountain of blood clots come out. And we are running the whole hospital on generators. So I don't know if they normally would have given you like a DNC to go in and clean that mess up in the uterus, but I was put on an IV drip to contract the uterus back down to help squeeze out any blood clots that were left. And I stayed in the hospital an extra day. And then they said, all right, well, it looks like the bleeding has pretty much stopped, so we're going to send you on your way. And there was so much pain. It felt like I had swallowed a bowling ball, because it was like pain down the inside of my thighs. And I couldn't barely hold the baby standing up, and I kept having to sit down to take the pressure off. But I didn't have any other symptoms. And I'm thinking, wow, it's so different. This birth was so different. It's my third birth. And I didn't think much of it, thinking, well, it's going to heal. It's a big baby. Maybe it just came out too quickly, and everything else going on. So 10 days after the birth, I went to the park, and my friends were holding a baby shower, because I had two boys and then I had a girl, and everybody was excited. Oh, we're going to give you girl things for your baby girl. And I get there, and I said to my friend, okay, I'm going to go use the restroom. I go to the restroom, and as I'm using the restroom, this enormous blood clot comes out, like larger than a man's large fists. Like, it's just enormous. And so I look at that and I say, wow, something is really, really wrong, because that's a very large blood clot. So I go back to my friend and I said, something is really wrong. Like, I had this huge blood clot come out, and put my kids back in the car, drove home, which was like 2 blocks away. And my parents were visiting from Sweden, where I grew up in Scandinavia in Northern Europe, to help with the kids and being there for the birth. And I told them what happened. And my dad was like, lie down on the bed. They called my husband. He came home from work, and we went to the ER. So here we are at the ER. I tell them what happened, and they do a visual inspection, and they say, well, there isn't that much blood coming out now. Could have been a second lining that came out. So I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, I'm young. I'm 34. I was in perfect health. I've never been sick before. And so they said, after 2 or 3 hours, they said, you can go home because it doesn't seem like any bleeding. It could have just been that lining. So the next day in the evening, it happens again. So we call the hospital and I'm yelling to my husband, like, I'm not going to the hospital because they're not going to do anything because this one blood clot came out and now I'm not bleeding again. It's just like this normal trickle. And so it was decided I should see the doctor in Huntington Beach the next morning, Friday morning at 10 a.m. and then see, he would evaluate me. So we go and see the doctor. And again, another manual visual inspection. And he says, well, it could have been a second lining that came out. I'm like, "Oh, again, we already did that." And there was no ultrasound, no blood work, nothing. It was just a visual inspection. This was in 1992. So he says, all right, I'm going to send you on your way. So he sends me on my way. And later that afternoon, again, I used the restroom, another blood clot. So we look at each other and say, well, this is the third time now. This is not just another second lining coming out. And I'm losing so much blood in this process. So we go back to the ER and again, we go there and they put me in this room. We get two doctors come in. They do a visual inspection. They say, well, it doesn't look like there's much bleeding right now. So we're just going to keep you for observation. And they close the door and I'm lying on this table. I don't even have like a buzzer or bell to ring or anything. I'm just lying on this table. And after a while, I start bleeding again. So I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. I'm finally bleeding. I'm in the ER. They're going to figure out something is not right. So as I'm lying there, not thinking much about it because I was just kind of used to it now and thinking, well, they're going to come check on me. So, this is the divine intervention part because this nurse came to check on me. If she had been 2 minutes later, I might not be here today. But she came at that moment, opened the door, saw how much I had been bleeding, and I saw the horror on her face when her jaw just wide open, like, oh, this is, way too much bleeding. So I can hear the call on the loudspeaker, OBGYN, stat to the ER, OBGYN, stat to the ER. And I can hear that call go out and she quickly cleans up, the bleeding, put new paper down on the table. And within 30 seconds, this middle-aged physician comes running full speed into my unit with a younger physician in tow. And he says, what's going on? And I told him, I've been bleeding since Wednesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and now again. And he said, all right, let's take a quick look. And as they are examining me, another large blood clot comes out. So this is now the fifth one. And at that point, he knows how much I've been bleeding because I told him. And I'm trying to sit up and tell him I'm not feeling too good. But he knew because he knew how much I had been bleeding. So he just pushed me back down on the table and starts tipping it. So my head is going towards the floor, my feet's going up in the air. And at this point, my eyes are closed because I can't keep my eyes open any longer. But I hear the room filling with staff and I hear the hustle and bustle. And I have a nurse on my right that's putting a blood pressure cuff on my arm. And the nurse on my left is trying to place an IV. I feel like I just jumped out of an airplane and I'm just free falling, down to the earth. And it's probably my blood pressure that's crashing because I just feel like I'm falling. And then the nurse on my right, she yells out, 50/15, hurry. And that's my blood pressure. And, around 60/20, the blood pressure can't support the heartbeat anymore. So I'm crashing at this point. And I'm thinking, what's taking this nurse so long to get the IV in? Because I can feel her trying to place the IV, but your veins, collapse, everything collapses when you go into that shock, which is why they place IVs many times when you go to the emergency room, because if something happens to you and you go into shock or something, they have access to inject medications now. But this was 1992, so maybe that wasn't the rule back then. So as I'm lying on this table, that nurse yells out, 50/15, hurry. And it was shortly after that I knew that I was dying. And that was a very different experience than when I was giving birth and I thought I was going to die, right? We think, oh my gosh, this is it. This was different. It was clear I was dying at this point. So I'm a complete atheist at the time. I don't believe in anything. I was raised in Sweden, so I was raised Lutheran back then. I was confirmed when I was 14, but I did not believe in the spirit world. I did not believe in God, Jesus, you name it. I thought you die, it's black, you're gone. That's it. So I had no belief system in place whatsoever. So I'm lying on this table and I know I'm dying. And so I'm thinking, well, if any of the things they taught me when I was 14 and I was confirmed is true, then this is it. So I said, I prayed to God to save my life. And I said, I have 3 children under the age of 6. They need a mother. And shortly after that, I was just pulled out of my body. And I find myself floating above my body. But in this state, there is, well, the first thing I noticed was that how can I be outside my body and still be me? How does this work? Because I didn't have any belief system. Why is my body down there? But I'm me and I'm out here. So, but in this state, I had access to everything. There was no time in this state, and I could have access to past, present, and future all at the same time. It was like everything was available all at once. It didn't matter if it was past or future. But there was also this unconditional, peace and love. I was just in a state of bliss, right? Being in this outside my body, that it was no thought of, how do I get back or anything. It was just like, wow, here I am. How can I be here? And as I'm outside and I have this awareness that I'm like connected, that I belong to the body, right? Just like you go to the grocery store and you come out and you look for your car, and that's your car. You get into your car. Now you're inside, you feel good again. And it's that kind of a feeling that my soul just stepped outside my body, just like you get out of your car and then you get back in your car. So I'm in this state, and I wasn't in this state very long, and I get pulled back into my body, and it's like a strong vacuum cleaner. It's just this. Anybody who has seen the Santa Claus movie, when he goes through the chimney to Tim Allen goes through the chimney to bring presents. It's like that is my best description. It's just this big suction of getting sucked back in. So I get back in my body, and they saved my life. And as I'm lying in the hospital bed the next day, I hear, so I'm trying to, how can this be? I'm trying to put everything in order. I didn't have a belief system that the spirit world existed, or that you could survive, that your soul survives death. So I'm lying in bed, and I become aware that my sister-in-law is in the corner of the left ceiling, and she says, everything is going to be okay. And she had just passed away literally 10 days earlier. And she was only in her 40s. She died of cancer. And I'm lying in bed thinking, this is it. Like, am I going crazy? Because yesterday I left my body, and now I think I can hear my sister-in-law talking to me. Like, what is happening? Right? And so, because I didn't have that belief system in place, I doubted my own experiences. Like, is that really what happened? Like, how could that be? It's not supposed to be that way, right? So then, they sent me on my way, and I was really sick. So they were supposed to give me blood, but they didn't give me blood. So I pleaded with the doctor, and he said, we have to give you blood. And I said, do you have to give me blood? Because, I have 3 children under the age of 6, and I don't want to wake up 6 years from now finding out that I have AIDS. Because this was in the middle of the AIDS epidemic. We didn't have a way of checking the blood yet. And a lot of people back then, in that specific time period, that received blood transfusions would then later find out that they had AIDS. So he said, well, we'll see what we can do. And they monitored my blood as long as I was in the hospital. And then they said, you were young and healthy. Otherwise, and you're making blood quickly, you're not going to feel too good for the next couple of months. But we're going to send you home with these supplements and medicines and all the different things. I have no idea what it was. And they sent me on my way. And I know I pretty much slept for 2 months because my parents changed their tickets back to Sweden twice. I was under wool blankets in California in July because my hands and feet were ice cold because I had so little blood in my body. I couldn't keep my head on a pillow because my head would just pound because I didn't have enough, blood pressure or blood in my body. So it took me a good 3 months before I could actually sit up in a rocking chair. So I would walk from the bedroom to the living room, which was just down the short hallway. And I would almost be completely passing out. Everything would black out, and I would literally dive onto the sofa before I passed out. So I couldn't be upright until like it took me like 3 months. So beginning of September, I could sit in the rocking chair, and then I literally sat in the rocking chair until Christmas. So it took me 6 months before I could even leave the house. And by right before Christmas, I remember bringing my kids to the grocery store just to prove to myself that I could do it. And we went to get a gallon of milk and some ice cream. The kids were very excited because our mom's been sitting in a rocking chair for 6 months. And then we all got the flu. And I was still having a really, really hard time, like getting, I lost all my muscles because I was basically sitting or lying down for 6 months. And we all got the flu that Christmas. And we didn't have any medical insurance. So here in the United States, we have private insurance, and typically it's through work. And my husband's company had been bought, so everybody got laid off. And he was a regional manager, so he had a good salary to support the family. But he got laid off, so he was just had to take whatever job he could get. And there's a 3 month wait period in the United States before you get the medical insurance. Or you can pay a really high amount of money to have what's called COBRA, which means that you get to keep the old insurance for 3 months. And I said, okay, so the insurance we had, they almost killed me. There's no point in paying this huge amount of money that we absolutely cannot afford. I said, I'm going to be fine. I'm healing. It's slow, but it's going to be okay. So we actually did not have insurance for an entire year because then 3 months, after 3 months, my husband got a better job. And after 3 months, I got a better job again. So we didn't have insurance until like almost exactly a year later. So my daughter was born June 20, and July 1st, 1993, we got insurance. So we had went, and the entire year I was sick, we didn't have insurance. So we all get the flu. So we go to a regular kind of like a walk-in clinic where anybody can go. We pay cash to be seen. And everybody got antibiotics. We all had pneumonia and had an ear infection. And we all get sent home. And 8 days later, everybody's recovered except I'm sicker. So I'm just getting sicker, even though I'm on the same antibiotics as everybody else, and everybody else got well. So I go back to the walk-in clinic and they say, wait, you were just here. Why are you not getting well? So they said, we're going to check your blood. So they took my blood and they come back in the room and they say, okay, so you have no immune system. Do you have AIDS or leukemia? And I said, well, I hope neither. This is what happened to me. And I didn't take the blood because that's exactly what we're afraid of. And they said, well, you have no immune system. You have to go to the emergency room now because you could literally die. And I said, I'm not doing that. I don't have insurance. And once I get insurance, then that's going to be a pre-existing condition in this country. So they said, all right, we're going to send you home and we're going to give you these different medications. And okay, hold on a second. I'm like having an itch. There's so many allergies here. So they send me home with all these different medications and say, we're going to check on you tomorrow. So again, they call the next day to make sure that I'm feeling better. And I said, okay, I'm feeling better. It's okay. And somehow miraculously I recovered. And then 3 months later, I start bruising. So fast forward to May of the following year. So now it's been 11 months since I gave birth. And I bump into the baby's changing table, something that would give you a bruise like the size of a small coin. But I have a bruise that spans my entire hip and it's all purple and red. And I'm getting pneumonia, and it's May in California. People don't get pneumonia in May typically unless they have an underlying condition. So I put my kids in the car, we go to the doctor. He listens to my lungs and he lifts my shirt and he can see the big bruise. So he thinks that my husband is abusing us. So he jumps in front of me and says, how did you get this big bruise? And I told him, I said, I bumped into the baby's changing table, and he doesn't believe me. So he looks on my children's bodies, can't find any bruises. And I said, look, I'm telling you the truth. I know something is wrong with my blood. And he's like, you have to go to the ER. Here's all the lab work. And I said, I'm not going to do it because it's mid-May. I've got 6 weeks to go until I get insurance. And if I go now, they're going to say I have a pre-existing condition and they're never going to give me the insurance. So again, he gave me the lab work, but I never went. And again, gave me all this medication. And again, I miraculously recovered. So this went on, right, for a couple of years. It took me a good 6 years to come out of this. It's called a bone marrow suppression and you can get a bone marrow suppression just by giving birth. It's called idiopathic aplastic anemia. And so now that I went to med school, I know that's what I had, but it was never like diagnosed formally. So here I am living this life, and I feel like my soul is always trying to leave, which is probably why, I have that feeling because I don't have any blood in my body. So I'm constantly feeling like I'm going to pass out. And I was bruising. I would help my kids tie their shoe. I put the knee on the floor. And just by putting the knee on the floor, I would get a bruise covering my kneecap. I mean, it was that bad. So I know that my platelet count was really low because you don't bruise like that. And I would get pneumonia, once or twice a year. It was just a mess. And I couldn't even stand up, like making pancakes for my kids. So I had a stool in the kitchen by the stove, and I would sit on the stove. And I'm, 35, 36 now, flipping those pancakes, because if I stood up, I would literally pass out. So this is just the life I'm living. So as I'm struggling to heal, so like 2 years after my first near-death experience, I have a second one. And I always joke that I didn't get the full message the first time. So the spirit world's like, okay, let's do it again. They saved her too quickly. But now she's ready for the next message kind of thing. So, and this was just my daily existence of, I would wake up in the middle of the night. I'd take my head off the pillow because my head is just pounding. And that was just the life I lived. And so again, this happens. I wake up, my head is pounding, take my head off the pillow. And then just like in the ER, it's just a split second and now I'm outside my body. But this second experience is so different. And this is really kind of what activated my life path and the work that I do today. So at this point, I get sucked out of my body and it's like I'm tumbling through darkness. The best description would be, imagine Star Wars, you're on the spaceship flying through space. It's that kind of a feeling of I'm just moving in darkness, tumbling through darkness. And I get to this place, and I call this place the mid station because there was this awareness that there were like levels above me and levels below me. So imagine going into a skyscraper and there's 100 floors in the skyscraper. And you push the button for the 50th floor. And you get off at the 50th floor. You can see everything that's there because you are on the 50th floor, but there's floors above you. You don't know what's on those floors because you're on the 50th floor. There's floors below you, but you don't know what's on those floors. You only know what's on the 50th floor because that's where you are. So it was like that. So I'm at this place that I call the mid station because it was that feeling of being in the middle. And I hear the most beautiful music. Now, you cannot make this music on the earth plane. I'm still searching for any sound, and I know other people who have heard the music and tried to recreate the music, and it's close, but it's not the same. It's like I have not been able to find sound that is that beautiful like this music. So I get to this place and I hear this most beautiful music, and I'm wondering where it's coming from. So I look to my right and I see a little log cabin. It literally looks like a Swedish sauna, like a little tiny log cabin. And I'm thinking, well, the music must be coming from there. So I open the door, look inside, but it's empty. So then I was like, wow, that's so strange. And I look to my left and it's a mirror image of the log cabin on the right. And so I open the door, I look inside, but it's empty. But then as I'm wondering where the music is coming from, I become aware of like a growing spotlight. So imagine that you're standing in a thick fog and somebody is putting a spotlight like they have like at a stadium, like like a soccer stadium or football stadium, and it's shining through the fog because the light is everywhere and you're completely submerged in that light, like you're in a dense fog, but it's all light. And as I'm turning around in this light, there is an outline of angels. So I see the silhouette of angels. And I'm aware that I don't believe in angels, but that's what I'm experiencing, right? So, and this had to be my experience, because if I had believed in angels or the spirit world, I would have told myself, you only saw it because you believed it, right? So that is my very skeptical mind. And so I had to experience things that I didn't believe. And so here I am standing in front of the outline of the angels, but the music is coming from the angels. But the light, there is this awareness that that light is, that is source or God or whatever you want to call that. It, naming it after a religion only divides us, because we are all part of this light. And that I'm just going to call it source. So people can call it whatever they want, but we belong to that source and we come from that source and we carry that light within us. We're all part of that magnificent, unconditional, loving light. And we are that, and we come from that. We return to that. And as I'm in this state, I become aware of two spirit guides or spirit entities. The one on my right is talking to the one that's diagonally to the left in front of me. And he says, "What is she doing here? She can't be here. She has to go back." And I'm like, wait a second. No, no, no. How can this be? How can I be outside my body and still be me? I mean, I spent 2 years thinking about this now. And the spirit guide on my left says, well, if I told you, you wouldn't remember, but you will remember this. And then it's like I'm standing on the moon all of a sudden. I'm looking down on the earth from outer space. And around the earth is what I called, because this is 1994, the silvery, glittery fishnet. Because there was no Google back then. We couldn't Google. Now you can Google grid around the earth, but we didn't have Google then. And I had grown up in Sweden, rowing the boat for my grandmother, laying fishnets in the ocean to catch fish for the family. And when she lifted those fishnets out, they're kind of diamond shaped, and those water droplets on the fishnet would sparkle in the sunlight. So I'm seeing this grid around the earth that I then say, well, it looks like a fishnet, like a silvery, glittery fishnet with those water sparkles on it. And the spirit guide says, everything on earth is connected to each other, but everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And with that information, I got sent back. And so what has happened is, after all these years, so for the next 12 years, it took me 12 years to really step into that power. And I would have, the spirit world would come and visit me. So between my first and my second near-death experience, in the middle of the night, my uncle shows up and he says, "I'm just saying goodbye and letting you know I've transitioned to the other side." So I'm thinking, well, my mom is going to call me tomorrow, because it was her brother, and let me know that her brother had passed. Nobody called me. Not, my mom didn't call me, my brothers didn't call me. And I'm thinking, wow, that's so strange. Another day goes by, and I'm thinking they'll call tomorrow. Nobody calls. Finally, Wednesday, my mom finally calls, and she does a little chat, checking in. How are you feeling? How are the kids? And then she says, well, I have something sad to share with you. And I said, yeah, I know. Your brother passed away 3 days ago. I knew it was just dead silence. My mom said, wow, you're just like your grandmother, her mother. So I have memories of my grandmother knowing when her friends passed away, and she would say, the bird came in the middle of the night. We have to go call this person because I know it's that person that passed away. So there's definitely something there. So for the next 12 years, I would know when people were sick. I would know when people were passing away. I would know we were going to be in a car accident. I saw my kids in a remote viewing. And all these different things happened over the next 12 years. And it was for me to learn to trust in the spirit world, basically. And after 12 years of this, the spirit world dropped in, and I said, well, my kids are getting older. I need to go back to work. But I was a programmer and a systems analyst for IBM in my youth. But with all these changes, I knew I had to go into the healing profession. And I had always wanted to be, somebody like that was a healer or a physician when I was a little kid, but I just never went that way. And I was looking online for something I was hoping to find something I could study online. So I run into this web place on the web, and it says naturopathic medicine. Oh, and you get to study acupuncture, homeopathy, botanical medicine, but you also study pharmaceutical and regular medicine. And then it said it was a regular med school. And I said, oh, I can't do that. I'm already, in my 40s. So I'm like 46 years old at this point. I can't, I'll be such an old student. I have to do all the prereqs. I have to take the math, the chemistry, the physics, all that organic chemistry and all those hard classes. And I said, okay, I'm going to look again tomorrow, close the computer. And as I'm walking to the kitchen, the spirit world drops in. But now it's been 12 years of me knowing that every time they drop in and telling me something, it's going to be something that actually happens. So the spirit world says, you have to go to medical school and you have to become a naturopathic physician. You need to have that degree for the work you're here to do, but you're not going to be working as a doctor the whole time. You're going to be doing this other stuff. And I'm like, what other stuff? And they're like, when the time is right, we'll tell you. And then they said, you have to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And, oh, you're to combine like East and West, and you're to bring messages and healing to the people. And I'm like, what messages and healing? What book? What do you mean? I have never thought of myself as writing a book. And they said, when the time is right, we'll tell you. For now, just get your prereqs done. And literally, the college was starting in 2 weeks. I jumped on my computer, got my undergraduate credits transferred over, and enrolled. I was literally in school like within 2 weeks. I was started my prereqs. And it was that strong of a message. But having listened to the spirit world for 12 years, I knew to just go with it and trust it. So I then went to medical school when I was 54, sailed through that, took my science boards after 2 years, took my clinical boards after graduating. And as soon as I graduated, I was 58 years old, I was taking a class in craniosacral therapy. And I met this woman, and she said, we were having dinner together, and we didn't know each other at all, and just got to know each other. And she said, I'm a medium, and somebody's here who wants to give you a message. So I said to myself, sure, I'm open, thinking there is no way she's going to be able to bring in a spirit that I'm going to recognize. It's one thing for me to connect with my own spirit world and, just talking, but she doesn't know anything about me. So I said, sure, give it a try. And it was very obvious that it was my mom. And she talked about laying the fishnets in the ocean and rowing the boat. I mean, nobody would have guessed that being in Scottsdale, Arizona, going out for dinner, because it's such a different environment. This is like the Wild West, right? So, but all these different evidence came through. And she said, well, your mom says you're to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And it was the exact same message I had received, years and years earlier. And she said, you have to go to Arthur Findlay College in England and study mediumship. And I said, I can't do that. I just graduated. I literally just took my boards 2 weeks ago, and I'm waiting for my medical license and to see if I even passed the boards. And she says, well, you have to go. And I was like, I can't do that. I'm in a residency. I don't even know if they're going to let me take vacation. And she was just adamant, and she says, you have to go. So finally, after like the 4th time, I said, okay, I'll figure out a way to go to Arthur Findlay College. 6 months later, I'm at Arthur Findlay College. And I have a reading with one of my teachers. And she said, oh, your mother is here. And she says, you're to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And I've gotten that message one more time. I've gotten that 4 times from 4 different mediums, and it always comes through the exact same way. So after going to Arthur Findlay several times, I became a medium. So I'm a medium now. And it was so interesting because that first time, I still remember it like yesterday, because I was still doubting after all this and 12 years going to medical school based on messages from the spirit world and being completely guided by the spirit world. I still doubted that you could bring in a spirit for somebody else, right? So one thing, just me having a conversation, but for me to just sit in front of some random stranger and then expect the spirit to come in for them, But sure enough, that is exactly what happens, right? Because they're connected to their loved ones and I'm connected to the client and we all connect together. And I remember sitting there for the first 2 days, we just did a lot of psychic work and connecting. And then on the third day, she said, okay, you guys are ready. Now we're going to start connecting with the spirit world. And it was literally like my first or second reading. And I'm sitting across from this woman that is from somewhere in the world, because people come from all over the world, all over Europe, Africa, Australia, United States, Canada, from everywhere to study mediumship at this particular college in England. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this woman, you look so young. I bet she doesn't even have her grandparents in the spirit world. Like, how am I supposed to do this? So I'm just like, okay, well, I have to just say what I feel, see, or hear, because that's what we're told to do, and just go with it. Because, in the beginning, you're going to be right sometime, wrong sometime, because you're learning to sort out where the messages are coming from. Is this my head or is it coming from somewhere else? So I bring in this lady and I say, there is an old woman with us, and she's living in an old elderly people's home, but it's a very small place. And there's maybe only about 10 tables in this place. And she's showing me a cup of coffee. Do you understand this? And she says, yes. I said, all right. And we continued, and I said, she's showing me where she lived, and she lived in the countryside. And I see a very large country kitchen. And then when you open the door to the front, there's chickens and pigs running loose outside. And then there's a fence and there's horses behind that fence. And I said, do you understand this? And she says, yes. And I said, okay. And then I said, so now she's again showing me a cup of coffee in the country kitchen. I said, do you understand this? And she says, yes. I said, okay. And then the final thing was, like, it's almost like a Disney cake. I call it a Disney cake when it has like 3 tiers of cake. And it had whipped cream around the edges, dotted with red cherries. So it literally looked like a cake that you would see in a Disney movie. And I saw the image 3 times and I'm thinking, this can't be right. It just can't be right. And eventually I said, all right, I'm just going to have to go with it because this is what she's showing me. So I said, she's showing me this cake, and do you understand that? And she goes, yes. So it turns out that this was her grandmother. She had grown up next door to her grandmother, and every day she would go to her grandma's house in the afternoon to have a cup of coffee with grandma. And that was the cup of coffee. That was our bond thing. And the animals were running outside because they were in farmers and like a farming family. And the cake was the cake that her grandmother made every year for her birthday. So, and that's how it all started. So that was, many years ago now. But it's so vivid because I was in such disbelief. And, and in the beginning, I just thought, it's just luck. It's just luck. And after you've done it several times, you're thinking, okay, it's not luck. There's something to this. And now my work is, I work a lot with ancestral healing, and we are so connected to each other and to our ancestors. And it's an illusion that we have that we are separate, because we are absolutely not separate. And I tell people, everybody goes through hardships in life, and the life itself is like riding a roller coaster. There are times when we're going to feel like we're on top of that hill, and there are times when we're going to be down in the dumps, and that's just life. Everybody has issues in their life, but sometimes we look at other people and we feel like they have easier issues, right? But those issues are hard for them, right? We all incarnate to learn certain things. But life is a roller coaster ride, and now I do a lot of work as a medical intuitive. So now I understand what that original message was when they said, you're not going to work as a doctor the whole time. That's just part of it, but you need the degree. So it has become emerging of all these different things, because I always work with the spirit world, right? The spirit world is always going to be chatting in my ear, guiding me along. So when I work with people, and it's often people that fall through the cracks, and I'll say, my spirit guide says you have this, so let me ask you about this. And sure enough, then they'll say, oh yeah, I have that, I have that, I have that. Okay, this is then my medical knowledge can come in and say, the spirit guide gives me this diagnosis. Do you have these symptoms? And they say, yes, that's exactly what's happening. And then I can guide them, and I can say, okay, you need to do this. You need to see this kind of doctor, or you need to have this kind of surgery. and nobody else is going to fix it. So I'm going to send you this information. But it just shows how divinely guided we are, because the people that find me, there's always something weird or something that I know about that we didn't learn in medical school, that typically is something you learn after you graduate, or you've had a patient that had this condition and that's why you know about it, or you had a relative or a family member that had that weird condition and then you know about it. And it's so divinely guided. And many times, I'll say, even, my dad saw you on a podcast and he knows I'm struggling, with this issue. And he said, you have to have a session with this person. And it's fascinating. It's like the spirit world is kind of tapping on our shoulder saying, go over here, go over here. She knows what's wrong with you. And it's the same for when I work as an ancestral healer, because a lot of the issues that we struggle with are actually things that our ancestors weren't able to resolve. So things that our ancestors experienced that were swept under the carpet. So if you were a child and said, why do we never talk about Uncle Bob? And your mom turns to you and says, shh, we don't talk about Uncle Bob. There was something that went down, something that he did, or they're ashamed of, that was swept under the carpet. Well, anything that's traumatic and swept under the carpet is going to repeat in the next generation or the generations that follow. But a lot of these things, whether we have whether we have physical disease, whether we don't feel seen and heard in life, we can't step into our full power, we have imposter syndrome. We have anxiety for things, we have fears about things, we have OCD. It doesn't really matter what it is. When you start looking at that pattern ancestrally, like everything comes from somewhere, combined with the things that we signed up for, to heal. Many times it's so clear that the person I'm working with is the one person in the family that is doing the healing for the family, right? They're the only ones that are working on it. It's fascinating. But we are all so entangled in such divine creatures. And that is what I do today. I work as a medical intuitive, evidential psychic medium, ancestral healer. I teach courses for the Shift Network, Theosophical Society, and other places to bring this message to people, to help people create healing in their own life. So I offer a lot of different kinds of sessions. I also do the messages from your spirit guides, which is a really fun one. So my life has become an integration of my medical knowledge, my counseling that you get in med school, and studying counseling after med school, as well as working with the spirit world. So it's the integration of all the experiences that I've had that has created this very unique ability to create and help healing for people in all over the world.
It's amazing, and it's nothing short of remarkable. Going through medical school at 54, that's gotta be intense, because from what you were telling me that you were doing before raising your kids, it definitely sounds like you were very analytical and savvy, so certainly you had the intelligence for it. But still, going back into, and not just any kind of college or university, but med school, which is the hardest type of university that we have, that's gotta be quite difficult. Did you experience any kind of difficulty in going through that? And there's also, I noticed a bit of doubt when you were being told that you had to pursue a degree in mediumship because you had just finished medical school. So, which I can absolutely understand. You're 54, you just got done with this school that you weren't expecting you were going to do. And now all of a sudden you have to learn something else. Why? So, but how did you know that that's what you needed to do? How did it become certain that you needed to follow this guidance and this advice?
Yeah, so my mom was adamant. She just kept saying over and over when I was having dinner with this woman, you have to go to Arthur Findlay College. It's like getting management training. It's like the training you went through when you were young. You have to do it. And it was just over and over. She kept saying it. And I said, all right, well, I guess that's what I'm going to do. I have to do that. And it was just a development it just felt right too, right? It's just like in my heart, I knew that she was right. And that message was so strong that I had to follow through with that. And it's just interesting, we're all guided if you just listen to it. And it's just, tuning into what we call the gut feeling or tuning into our heart. And, when we don't know what it is that we want in life, I tell people just put your hand on your heart, close your eyes, and ask your heart, what does your heart want you to do? And see what answer you get, right? And many times, it's our brain gets in the way. Our brain is always justifying, oh, that's a dumb idea. That's going to cost too much money, or you're too old, right? And that's just the brain being logical. But we have to sort of tune away from that and tune into the heart and our gut feeling. This is something I really want to do, right? You just go with it. And that's the hard part, I think, with the brain, because sometimes you're thinking, how am I going to do that? How am I going to pay for that? Or, but it was just, I just knew I had to go to med school, and somehow it was going to work out. I didn't know how, but you just have to trust it. You just have to trust. And I think that's one of the hardest things in life, is to trust our gut feeling. Unless we're in danger, then it's a lot easier, right? If you're in danger, you're being followed as a woman on the street, you're going to trust that gut feeling, like, oh my gosh, somebody's following me. I need to get out of here, go into a store or something. Then we trust our gut. But when we get other messages, we're not as good as trusting that gut. But think of it as, I have this gut feeling, just like if I was in danger. But that's what we need to learn to trust.
It's so amazing that you say that, because I do believe that guidance is available to all of us if we ask for it. And I think so often we're stuck in wanting something or wondering why things aren't happening for us. But very often I think we like to be in the driver's seat of our own life, and we rarely let things go or let things fall into place. And from my own experience, also I'm a recovering control freak, I noticed that when things fall into place and when you let go, better things happen than what you were forcing your way into.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely true, that, when we let go of that control, we like to be in control. But when we let go, better things often happens. We just have to learn to go with the flow.
And I also wanted to go back to ancestral trauma, because nowadays I think the word trauma is very much used. We all talk about our own traumas, and which is amazing, because talking about it and accepting it is the first step in solving it. However, ancestral trauma, I think, is quite new to us. And I'd like to know more about how we can carry trauma that does not actually belong to us, so something that does not reminisce of an experience that we've had in early childhood or in our lives, and what tends to happen if we shove it aside, as we often tend to do nowadays. We push those feelings to the side and we say, no, you gotta stay there because I need to focus on this and that.
Yeah, so many things, so exactly when it doesn't make sense. I like to use the example of the grandfather served in World War II. And every time he heard the sirens go off, then he knew that the airplanes were coming, they were going to drop bombs, and he had to get himself to shelter and safety. So every time he hears that siren go off, he goes into fight or flight, tries to run to the shelter, take cover. But now he has a granddaughter. So he survived the war, he had kids, and then they had kids. And now he has a granddaughter. And every time she hears a siren, she has anxiety and a panic attack. But she has never had a traumatic experience herself. She's never been in a fire. She's never been in a car accident or the police came. So it's not her own experience that's causing her to have the anxiety when she hears the siren. So where is it coming from? And that's the grandfather that is passing down. So we actually, when we have traumatic experiences, we have DNA studies now that show that those people that survived those traumatic events actually coded in their DNA via epigenetics, which is the software for the DNA. So they code differently. So we can see, in the people that lived the trauma during the war have one expression of certain gene markers and proteins and enzymes, and then the offspring has now been affected by that. And we can see it in different studies too, how it gets passed down. So it's not, we're entangled, right, via DNA, we're entangled via our own experiences and our own lived experiences, and then quantum physics, entanglement of all things. Instantaneous entanglement is probably the best expression for that. So we were very entangled with our ancestors and their experiences, and the things that they weren't able to resolve is typically what comes back. And we also have a tendency to repeat the patterns in different ways. So if mom struggled with something, then you might struggle with the same issues, the same emotions, the same issues that she struggled with, because many times the patterns just repeat through the generations. And it's fascinating to work with it, because I work with, with all different kinds of clients. I mean, it's anywhere from any kind of work or job, or a mother or a physician or a psychotherapist, counselor, it could be anybody. So, but it's really interesting because even when I work with like a physician as a client, if they're my client, or a counselor or a psychotherapist, and I say, you know what, it looks like this was the pattern, and this was like how your dad was, and this is your mom, blah, blah, blah. And you tell them, and then all of a sudden you can see the lights go on. Oh my gosh, I couldn't see it for myself. And I help people with this all day long. But I think there is I think it's hard for us to see it, our own issues, because we're so entangled emotionally too. Like, oh, I hate the way my mom did that, or I hate the way my dad did that. And we get emotional. We have so many emotions about it, or hurt feelings about it, that we sort of can't get away from it and look at it with a bird's eye view. So it's fascinating. It's just I love doing that, because it helps so many people to get out of that rut, because it's literally an energetic loop that we find ourselves in. We're just kind of stuck in that and repeating it. But then when you see it and you understand where it's coming from, then you can just release it. It's so easy to release it once you understand where it's coming from, right? It's like saying you go through the field and you get a rash. Once you figure out that there is a plant in that field that's giving you a rash, you solve the problem. You don't go that same path anymore, because that's where that plant is that's giving you a rash. It's the same thing when you realize where the struggles are coming from. And everybody has struggles. There is no such thing as a struggle-free human life, right? Everybody has struggles. It's just a matter of which ones did you sign up for in this life. Oh, I'm going to take those from my mom, those from my dad, that from my grandfather, and this one from my aunt. Okay, that's my bucket list in this life to see if I can resolve these issues. So that's sort of what it feels like, because it all comes from somewhere.
And you mentioned there that once we understand it, it's easy to release it. Is it indeed just a matter of, say, somebody in our lineage has died drowning, and then we're just afraid of water, whatever happens? Is the fact that we're understanding that and accepting and understanding that it makes sense, is it enough to release it and then having the fear go away?
Yeah, so the way I work with it is we recognize where it's coming from. And many times it's like peeling an onion. So once you recognize one issue, then something else is going to surface and you peel that onion. But I work with it spiritually. So when I do an ancestral healing session with someone, we go through the different issues and figure out where it actually came from. And then the last 10 minutes, we do what I call like a soul to soul communication. I do the guiding, so the client doesn't have to really do anything. So I'll do the talking. I'll say, let's go talk to your mom, and say we can see how this issue came about. We can see the struggles that mom also had, which is why she became the person she became, and that's why you were treated the way you were treated. So it's kind of like following that thread back in time and recognizing the issue and saying, now I see it, and then we create healing for that by calling in our ancestors and our spirit teams that are always ready to help us release and create healing. So I kind of look at it like noise canceling headphones. It's like we have this dissonant wave in the universe, and then we send healing to it, and then it sort of cancels out. because it's all just about recognizing it and saying, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. I can create healing for this. And then you can send healing to that and release that. And I've had, clients tell me the most amazing stories of how their daughter hasn't talked to them for 2 years, and then 2 weeks goes by after we do an ancestral healing. The daughter doesn't even know about it, and all of a sudden she's calling and says, hey, how you doing? Or people that said, I've been struggling with colitis or this, intestinal inflammatory disease for the last 30 years. But, I saw you last year and it was good after that. So, but now I want to work on this issue this time. So it's really interesting how sometimes things just clear. It's like it was ready to be released and healing to be created for that. And it doesn't really matter what it is. It's just, I'm going to say it has something to do with recognizing it and sending healing to it and releasing it from the client, so that client says, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. I can see why I had this struggle, and now I can release it. It's like quantum healing.
Wow,
I wish
that's
somebody could
fantastic.
actually explain what's going on. And Nobel Prize winner for physics, it'll come, but we're not quite there yet. So, but that's what happens, and that's all you can do is say, okay, well, it seems to be working, what we're doing in the way we're creating healing. And it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter how it works. It just matters that it does work in the end.
Exactly. And I think the more these things are coming into the mainstream, the more we talk about it, the more, people have these experiences. Of course, they're going to tell other people that are struggling. So the more it becomes part of our normal life, the more the science will catch up and we will start looking into it. So who knows, 10 years from now, I'm pretty sure we'll have studies and we'll look into it some more. But as you say, for now, the most important thing is that it works and it helps people. So why does it matter
Exactly. I mean,
how it works?
yeah, it doesn't really matter how it works. It's just it works. So that's it. It's like taking your car to the car mechanic shop. I don't care how they fix it. I just want them to fix it. Okay, works, not great,
Exactly.
right? And it's that kind of same feeling. It doesn't really matter why or how. It's good that it does work. So
Dr. Lotte, thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your story, for sharing your lessons with us. For anybody that wants to reach out or find out more about your work, where can they find you?
yes, just go to drlotte.com. So it's DRLOTTE.com. And on there, you can see all the different types of sessions that I offer: medical intuitive, ancestral healing, messages from spirit guide, mediumship readings. And you can just book a time if you want to work with me online. You just select your time zone for what part of the world you're in, and then you'll see on the calendar the times available in your time zone. So that's the easiest way. And also to sign up for my newsletter online on my website to stay up to date, to find out all the different courses and things like that I'm teaching as well.